And we're live. Welcome back to another episode on Coffee with Craner. Today I have Ann Jarvis. For those who don't know Ann Jarvis, she is a journalist and also a opinion columnist for the Windsor Star. And I'm actually right by the Windsor Star virtually, so thanks for joining me. And for those watching, if you do have any questions throughout the live stream, please feel free to comment them below, and we will try our best to get to them. Glad to have Ann on the show today. And just to give you a brief background, she's from Burford, Ontario, where she started her career. In the 1990s, she came to the Windsor Star. She's been here for 30 years. And throughout her career, she's won multiple awards, including a provincial newspaper award and then also a national newspaper award. 30 years at the Star and one of the top publishing companies in Windsor, Essex. So I'm glad to have Ann on the show today. So, Ann, to kick things off, where in downtown Windsor would you say is your favorite place to get coffee?
I like the Coffee Exchange. Nice atmosphere, great treats. And I actually don't drink coffee, though, I have to say. I drink steamed milk with vanilla flavor in it. I just don't like the taste of coffee, but I like the smell of it. But a nice, hot, creamy, sugary, steamed vanilla milk is very good.
Fantastic. Are you working at home, or have you been able to get to the Coffee Exchange?
I have been working at home, so I haven't been downtown as much as I usually am. I'm usually there every day, of course. But we have been working at home since the pandemic hit here in mid-March. And we're scheduled right now to remain at home until January 1st. So my office is now my kitchen. We call it the South Windsor Bureau. And many people have noted when I published a picture of my desk that it has a blender in the background. And so, yes, that's for delicious drinks.
Yes, no, definitely. What's your experience been working from home?
Pardon me?
What's your experience been like working from home?
It's interesting. I was the last one out of the office. I was pretty much kicked out of the office. I didn't want to work at home. I thought it would be distracting. And it is, but I kind of like it now. I mean, I worked in shorts and flip-flops most of the summer. If I have to go out to talk to someone or to a news conference, I run up and try and dig something decent out of my closet. I save my parking fee. I canceled that because I don't use it. And I do end up working longer, I think. I mean, I never get out of the office on time anyway, but there is still some distraction here, so I end up working longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it couldn't be hard to figure out when to kind of turn everything off and try to enjoy some life in the afternoon.
It is, yeah, because I find, especially when you can't really do a lot, you can't go out, to say a restaurant or something for dinner. Well, I guess you can if you want to eat outside, or I guess you can indoors still here, but we don't do it as often. So sometimes I just think, well, I'll just, get another call in because I can't do anything else.
Yes, yeah, easily get distracted. But to kind of jump into our first question, you're both a journalist and an opinion columnist, and your role changes depending on what you're writing. How do you keep both a fact-based opinion and a fact-based role in the news, and then also an opinion-based role in the news? Because it can be, do you find it difficult to transition from just factual and versus your columns that you write?
I don't find it difficult, but I think it is confusing for readers sometimes. That's probably one of the biggest complaints or sort of comments I get. I think that the big thing to remember, though, is that they're both based on the same foundation, and that is the facts. I mean, when I write an opinion column, or sometimes it's more of an analysis that may not include an opinion, but kind of sort of analyzes and gives context to the issue, all of that is based on facts. I think the big difference, of course, with an opinion column is based on those facts, I come to a conclusion, what I think after looking at all the facts and researching and talking to lots of people, in case I'm missing a perspective that I hadn't thought of, then I come to a conclusion, and that's my job, and that's my conclusion. It may not be your conclusion or every reader's conclusion, but that's my job. And of course, in a regular story, you don't come to a conclusion. You report the facts, and the readers can come to their conclusion.
So for the reader, what do you say to the people that do get confused? Are you making sure that you follow up with them and kind of reassure them and I don't know, I guess make them less confused? Is there any way that you can do that? Really?
Well, often one of the telltale signs of a column is my picture runs with it, and that's just sort of a standard thing that happens with columnists. And oftentimes, if I'm just straight reporting a story, there is no picture. And usually, I mean, with an opinion column, it's pretty clear that my opinion is in the piece. And although I know it's still confusing sometimes for readers, and one of the most common comments I get is you're not objective. But of course, that's not my job when I'm writing an opinion column. But I do write more stories now than I used to because we have fewer staff. I fill in reporting quite regularly. Every 3 weeks or so, I spend a week reporting. But yeah, it's a bit confusing for readers, I know.
So what of the columns that you wrote, what would be one that stands out to you, or one of your favorite opinion-based columns that you've wrote at the Star?
That's hard to say. I mean, I've been doing the columns for 11 years now. Some of them have had a lot of impact. Some of the impact has been pretty immediate. I did write one on, if you remember, when under the previous mayor, Eddie Francis, the city tried to replace the ice at Charles Clark Square with fake ice. It's like these pieces that sort of snap together like a puzzle, and they're made of some sort of, I'm not even sure what it is, but it's like skating on linoleum. So they put this in, and before they opened it, I asked, can I come and skate on it and try it out? And they said, sure. And so I went, and it was terrible. It really was. It was like skating on my mother's kitchen floor. And I wrote a column about it. And the mayor conducted an email vote, and they ripped the stuff out. And that was the last of the fake ice at Charles Clark Square. So I guess that's one of the fun things that you can put in your 2 cents, and sometimes you can make a difference. But there's lots of things that lots of issues. That's sort of a kind of just a sort of a more minor one, but yeah.
For sure. And you mentioned your opinion columns have impact. What do you mean by impact?
Well, sometimes they can have influence on decisions. And I remember I wrote a column, there was a by-election in Ward 7 in 2013, and there was a candidate named Eric Kuzmierczyk running. And when I first wrote about Eric Kuzmierczyk, he had this platform that education is economic development. And I kind of dismissed him, saying that, education is a provincial responsibility. And he was angry about that. He called me and we had a long chat. And he really brought me around to his side of what he was getting at, that yes, it's a provincial responsibility, but there's a lot of things that cities can do to support schools and colleges and universities. And that in fact, cities across the US do this all the time because they recognize the importance of an educated and skilled labor force. So I wrote a second column saying, this guy's the real deal. And he won that by-election by 52 votes. And now, of course, he's the MP for Windsor Tecumseh.
Do you find it often where your opinion changes through conversations with the public, or most of the time what you're writing is you're sticking with your gut?
Well, I think if the opinion changes, it's more during the process of researching the piece and talking to people. The one thing I have learned, and I tell myself this all the time, is that the more people I talk to, the better the column, because there is always something, perspective that somebody else brings up that I hadn't thought of. And I think, man, if I hadn't talked to that person, I wouldn't have this in this column, and it would not be, it's better for having that perspective in it. So yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. Well, for example, the hospital location, that's a controversial subject. And I found this one of the most difficult issues ever that I've tried to take a stand on, because I think that the people who were concerned about the location on sort of the fringes of the city made a lot of good points. But then I read the city's plans and the decision in the first appeal, and the plan for that area calls for it to be completely built out, and there will be public transit, there will be active transportation, there will be a mixed use area of residential, commercial, business, institutional, like the hospital, and and then we had been having this debate for years, and meanwhile we weren't getting a hospital, and it was clear that it was being delayed because of this ongoing debate. So that was an example of something that I changed my mind on because of further research and reading the judge's decision and reading the city's plan for that area. Not that it was easy. I think it's still a really difficult issue to pick a side on. But
So when when you write your opinion column, where are you receiving most of your feedback or perspective on the issues that you're writing? Is it all just you and you've done the research and now you're going to write your opinion on it, or do you take in other perspectives from the community?
oh, for sure, I have people I call regularly all the time for different sort of matters, especially when it comes to political stuff. I have sort of I call them my panel. They're not really my panel, but they're just people that I talk to regularly who I know are very astute politically and really follow politics. And I call them up and we chat, and they always seem happy to talk about it. They like to talk about politics, and I appreciate hearing their perspectives. So yeah, I talk to a lot of people for almost every column I write.
Very interesting. It's great to see that you're taking in others' perspectives when you're writing your columns. And I kind of want to jump into the pandemic. So with the pandemic, I could imagine Windsor Star is definitely affected. When was another time in your career or at the Star where things drastically changed?
Well, I think it's pretty clear things drastically changed with the challenges facing the newspaper industry, all newspapers, and that is, the shift from print to digital, and then of course the ongoing issue of giants like Facebook and Google using our stories, and we don't get a lot out of that. And so when you can read the stuff for free on Facebook and Google, a lot of people don't pay for our stuff. And that's been pretty devastating to the entire media industry. It's no secret there have been drastic cuts across the industry, and that means you don't have as many people and as many resources to do the work that you do. So that's affected us, and it's affected every newspaper.
So from I guess the current pandemic, what are some things that you've learned from this experience?
From the experience of the pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, you're working from home. Your role, I guess, has changed a fair amount. What do you think you've learned from the pandemic? Whether are you having to work harder? What has it been like for you?
I was really hustling for a while at the height of the pandemic. I was writing 4 and 5 columns a week back in March, April. Um, I don't know. I mean, working from home has been sort of a different, physical setup. Um, in terms of the pandemic, I think the big lesson learned from the pandemic is the importance of accurate information. Um, and we covered the pandemic. We covered all the angles. We covered migrant farm workers. We covered the long-term care homes. We covered the schools. Um, we covered the hospitals. Um, and it just obviously the pandemic affected every aspect of life, and we covered it. Um, and I even wrote about my mother died in long-term care in June in the middle of the pandemic, and my brother and I have not been able to see her since March, since the long-term care home was closed. And so that was pretty tough to write about that. Um, but I felt that it was important. I mean, the outpouring that I heard after that column was unbelievable. So many people had had this happen to them, and so many people, and not just people with loved ones in long-term care, the people with loved ones in group homes, for example, with intellectual disabilities, maybe, who were suddenly cut off from their families because of the restrictions that were designed to keep them safe. And I think that what happened with the toll that it took on people to be isolated like that, and these are very vulnerable people, the elderly and people with intellectual disabilities who can't always understand why they're not able to see their families. That was a huge lesson we learned in this pandemic. I think that's one of the biggest lessons we learned in this pandemic. Um, Other than sort of the science of how it works, how it spreads. And so I think it was really important for us to cover that.
No, definitely. Now, going into your job, and you've worked for the Star for 30 years, a great opinion columnist, and I've heard it from everyone in the Windsor community, just of how strong of a writer you are, and the real caliber of your writing. It's made headlines, and many are just interested in reading it each week. What would you say would be the most difficult part of your job?
you know, Multiple columns a week. You're churning them out. I cover. I'm sort of like a jack of all trades and a master of none. I mean, I write about politics. I've written about schools, healthcare, police, courts. I even wrote about the Spitfires a few times. I mean, and so you're churning these columns out. There's always a deadline, and you know that they're going to be critiqued by an awful lot of people, pretty much everyone who reads them. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of stressful, and people don't hold back in terms of what they think, and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, certainly someone who gives you my 2 cents all the time, I'm not going to say you shouldn't give me your 2 cents. So that's fine. But that's I guess what I find the most stressful.
For sure. Now, I guess I mean, you've been doing this for a fair amount of time, and you're constantly writing. Really, what excites you about your job? What do you really enjoy?
Well, I guess the flip side is that I really love my job. I mean, I love having my 2 cents. I love current affairs, and I love the written word. I really do. Um, and so, some days I feel really stressed out, and but I always come back to, there's another column that gets me all sort of, psyched up, and I can't wait to write about it. And I guess that's what sort of keeps me going. I honestly do love it. I'm not just saying that.
No, definitely. And it's been great having you on the show. I mean, for those, I turned the mic around and I'm interviewing Anne, one of Windsor Star's top columnists. She's been in the game for 30 years and doing a great job covering so many different stories in our community. And I appreciate you joining me on the show today on a Friday evening. I hope you have a great weekend. And for those watching, thanks for watching. Please do feel free to put any questions in the comments. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Lyndon.
Thank you.